You were listening to Juliet there. What's your response to what she's saying?
Well, I hope she's not as stupid as she's pretending to be, because, firstly, just factually, Abdullah was the main feature of the documentary. He actually read out the scripted narration all the way through, clearly recorded in a recorded studio, clearly written for him, because it covered things that weren't within his so-called lived experience, to use a modern phrase. He covered all sorts of factual and information material that was not from a child's perspective. So it's just factually wrong to say that he wasn't the main child in the documentary. And indeed, I imagine that she, as I'm guessing she's a bit of a lefty, would probably have objected if the BBC made a film featuring, I don't know, a Tory minister's son and didn't tell anybody, and they had all sorts of views on a highly charged political anti-Semitic situation. Of course, she would be the first in line shouting about it. But if she can put on her keffiyeh and protest against Israel, I'm not surprised that she's doing that in this case. What the BBC put out was a documentary that whitewashed the genocidal anti-Semitism of Hamas, and that's not an exaggeration. They even mistranslated the Arabic word for Jew several times, 5 or 6 times, as Israeli. They made sure that they covered, for people who didn't understand that, the fact that Hamas's intentions were genocidal against Jews. So she asks, why would you want this film taken down? Well, as a Jewish person, but as a human being, I think trying to whitewash the intent of a terrorist group, defined by this country as a terrorist group, to wipe out Jews, to fight Jews, to wage jihad against Jews. They translated that as make battle against the Israelis, jihad against Jews. Of course I'd want that taken down. Yeah. Any sane and normal, reasonable person would want that taken down, because the BBC, our national broadcaster, shouldn't be broadcasting that sort of propaganda.
Jonathan, do you believe that it was intentional, or do you believe that the things that you're mentioning there, like the mistranslation, like the fact that, it wasn't fully transparently mentioned in the documentary about the relationship here, do you think those things were intentional decisions, or do you think they were production errors and there's a naivety going on here?
To some extent, it doesn't matter, because both of them show massive incompetence on the part of the BBC.
I agree. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. But it does matter in the sense that some people do think that this was intentional, and others do believe that it was a bit of a mess.
I don't want to try and, ascribe blame where I can't know, but I will say that I find it very difficult to believe that somewhere along that line it wasn't intentional, whether it was the cameraman who's been shown to have been celebrating or supporting the October the 7th atrocities, or whether it's some of the other names in the credits. You just need to go through them and Google them. You'll see some of them have some quite unusual backgrounds in terms of making a supposedly impartial film for the BBC. So somewhere along the line, yes, I imagine somebody intentionally did this, whether it was just the Hamas stringers and handlers in the Gaza Strip who made sure that the BBC were fed this, and perhaps they were just credulous enough to swallow it whole, because they've been the loudest flag wavers of not calling Hamas terrorists for the last 17 months. So it's no surprise that they then put out Hamas propaganda on the BBC. But I would say that I believe, yes, more people knew about this than I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt, because this is a documentary that would have been checked really at the highest levels for compliance.
Jonathan Sacerdoti, thank you very much for that.